Fast Girl, a life spent running from madness. Suzy is a 3-time Olympian, 7-time U.S. national champion, and record 9-time NCAA champion track and field athlete. Yes. She is also the author of the New York Times best-selling memoir, Fast Girl, a life spent running from madness. Please welcome Suzy Hamilton.
You would think with my running I'd be a little faster getting up here. But I broke my toe less than a week ago, and it was just hanging there. But thank God they were able to put it back on. So I know it's kind of gross. You can go on my Instagram and check it out. But I think the story part is over, so you actually won't see it. But it's Favor Hamilton. You can check it out. You know what? We all have stories in this room. We all have wonderful stories to tell, and we also have stories of trauma or despair. And me sharing my story was a very difficult thing. And in my book, if you decide to read it, what I'm talking about, there's so much more to cover. And I'm just going to go through it the best I can. But again, if you want more details, more description of everything, the book will describe and make things more clear for you. So mine started when I was a young girl. I discovered running. I discovered that running felt like running like a horse. It felt like this freeing experience for me. And I didn't quite understand why my brain felt so good when I ran. I didn't understand endorphins, but this was different. This was an incredible high. And so running became my drug of choice at a very young age. I didn't know that I would later down in my life, be diagnosed as having bipolar. So growing up as a child, I ran every day. And I was tormented very much by my brother as a little girl. He would tease, and just to the point where I was in tears all the time. And I didn't understand why his behavior was so disruptive to me, to my family. The music would be blaring in the house, and I would beg for him to turn it down. He would do the craziest things. He would take me on his motorcycle at these high speeds, risking my life. He would jump off cliffs, not knowing what was below him. His behaviors were so incredibly risky. There was a part of me that thought my brother wanted to die. He was in his teens, and I was 12 when he was 18, and things were starting to develop at that age at a very fast pace. He lost his girlfriend. She had died of a rare illness called Rye syndrome, I believe it is, and at that point after her death, he really spiraled out of control. Didn't know at that time that triggers can be a big source of bringing on bipolar. So my brother was diagnosed shortly after her death. And to speed up in the story, it was hard for him to have relationships, but he finally found a woman that he embraced. They got married. Something happened in the relationship that he was 37 years old. It was 9/9 of 99, and I'll never forget that day. He took his life, and because of the other triggers building in his life, because of his illness, and because of the trauma that had happened with his wife, it was too much to handle. But we all have things that go wrong in our life, and we can get through them. We don't take our life. But my brother had gone off of his medications 2 weeks before his death, and his medications are what kept him level. We couldn't figure out, at least I couldn't, for the longest time, what bipolar was. My entire life, never talking about it in my family. And I realized after his death, I dove into every book I could find on bipolar, learning all about it, not knowing that I was carrying this genetic illness in me. After his death, I then made my 3rd Olympic team. And I remember going into that 3rd Olympics thinking, okay, I just ran the fastest time in the world. I can win this race. That was the voice that was trying to convince me, you can win this. But deep in my heart and soul, I knew I was in deep trouble for this race. Nike, who is our wonderful sponsor here, had done a commercial for me the day that this was done months before the race, and I'm at the starting line at the Olympics, looking out into the crowd like this, thinking, oh my God, I have to win this race. But the anxiety was building so much in me, and I knew I wasn't going to win. And I knew Nike was watching me because I just did this big commercial for them. They knew I was going to win this race. I was thinking about my brother's death at this time. I was thinking about so many things at that starting line. Instead of thinking about the race, my life was going through me, and I knew I was in trouble. So fast forward through the race, with 200 meters to go, I started to have a severe panic attack. And I mean severe. I've never had a panic attack this bad in my life. I see white. I no longer hear the crowd of the Olympics roaring. And I feel my heart just racing. And my legs are bricks, just trying to lift my leg. Each step was torture. 100 meters to go. Looking back, I can't even believe I made it this far. 100 meters to go, I'm winning the race. Just have to make it to the end down there, and I'll have the gold medal. Nike, my family. I'll be able to make my family proud, and it will help us to deal with my brother's death. If I could just get that medal, everything in my life will be good again. And at that moment, one runner passed me, 2 runners, 3 runners. Every chance of getting an Olympic medal was gone. And so in my brain, I thought, oh my God, I can't cross that finish line. Everybody will see me as the loser. The reporters will wonder, what happened? They will interrogate me. Why did you do this? Why did you lose this race? So instead of just finishing, I fell on purpose. And it was very realistic. And go on YouTube. You can Google this race. It's there for you to see. And sometimes I think, God, I was a really good actress that day. But I know because of my anxiety, it was just, I needed to surrender so bad from that race. I just let it go. I had enough. And at that point, I'm laying on the track thinking, I am the worst person in the world. I'm the biggest idiot. Why did you let this happen? Everybody, the world is watching you. Every single one of you. You were glued to your TV that day. That was going through my brain. Everybody in the world was watching me. But they weren't. But that's how extreme this event was. This was extreme trauma. I didn't realize at the time the effect of that one race would have on me. Get back to Wisconsin, where I was living and training at the time. And I realized that I didn't want to be seen by the public. I was so embarrassed. I was embarrassed by my actions of falling on purpose, but the world didn't know my secret that I fell on purpose. I started to train again for my next Olympics. This would be my 4th Olympics, but nobody knew deep down inside I was done with running. I had it. I couldn't tell my husband that I was done with running because I know he would have said, Suzy, you have this talent. Why would you just let it go? Why would you waste that? I couldn't tell Nike that. They would say the same thing. What's wrong with you? Pull it together. Just get out there and train. But nobody knew the torment that was in me. And I didn't yet. I still didn't know that I suffered from bipolar. 4th Olympics, another thing happens. I get injured. I'm unable to make the final in the Olympic trials. Was I happy? Yeah. I was elated inside, but I couldn't tell anybody. I could finally have a baby. In my contract, I had to be ranked number 1 in the US every year to get paid my full salary. Each year that I wasn't number 1, they would cut my salary in half. And I had maintained that for 10 years. And this was the time, okay, I'm not going to be ranked number 1. Thank God I can have a baby. And I was so lucky that because of that race, I was able to get pregnant. And I had my baby girl, Kylie, who is now 13 and 5'7". I'm 5'3", so I look up to her. It's just an amazing gift. And when I had Kylie, something drastic happened to me very quickly after her birth. And I told my doctor, I just don't feel right. There's something so sad in me. I couldn't really describe what it was. I felt so overwhelmed by life. Even my dog's barking was too much for me to handle. And she said, you have postpartum. And basically what I need to do is, there wasn't a medication that I wanted to take. She said, what you need to do is just slow down in your life, get more help. But I thought postpartum was when you were pushing your baby away. And for me, my baby was my source of happiness. I didn't really speak up to this doctor. It was 5 minutes that she diagnosed me with postpartum. And after that, something deeper happened. I had a suicide attempt, and I started having these thoughts of suicide all the time. But one thing that kept me from completing it was my baby girl. I can't leave her. At that point, I knew desperately that I needed help. And my husband and I got in a big argument one night, and just kind of blurted out of me. I said, and by the way, I almost killed myself tonight. I almost drove the car off the road. I was this close. Angry, I just wanted to get it out there. And instead of him saying, you're just doing that to cause the fight, you're just inflating it. Or instead of him saying, that's ridiculous, why would you say such a thing? He said to me, he said, listen, are you gonna call the doctor or am I gonna call the doctor? He suddenly got very serious. And I said, I'm gonna call the doctor. It was the hardest thing in the world, because where I lived in Madison, Wisconsin, everybody knew me because of my background in my running. And so I called the doctor, and oh my God, I have to tell this nurse or receptionist that I almost killed myself. How in the world? She's gonna tell so-and-so, and the whole community's gonna know. I'm gonna be so embarrassed, and I'm the perfect poster person for this state. But I told her, because my husband was right over me, telling me, you have to do this. So I went into the doctor. She said, we need you right now. And I said, I'm fine. My husband's here. I'll come in tomorrow. So I came in tomorrow. Within 10 minutes, you know how doctors have to get you in and get you out because they have to see their 30 patients a day? Within 10 minutes, she diagnosed me with depression. She gave me an antidepressant, Zoloft, which is a great antidepressant for people with depression. The worst drug for me, not in every case, but for me, Zoloft was the worst choice for bipolar. They didn't know I had bipolar. So I'm given Zoloft, and suddenly my life is changing. I'm feeling really good. I'm feeling really, really good. Like no inhibitions. I mean, none whatsoever. I was elated, but I was talking a mile a minute. Things were happening to me. I was doing things that I normally never, ever could do. My husband said, you know what? I think we should try something different. You're feeling really good. And at that time also, we were working real estate and our marriage was struggling. So we thought, let's do something to kind of rekindle our marriage. So we went to Las Vegas and we jumped off an airplane. And I swear to God, you could never pay me. You could have paid me, said, here's $1 million. Will you jump out of an airplane? I said, absolutely not. I've even talked to friends and I've told them, would you jump out of an airplane for $2 million? No way. Anybody here, would you jump out of an airplane for $2 million? Okay, but I'm saying it's only half of you. It's only half of you. I only saw half your hands. $1 million? How many would do it for $1 million? Okay. Oh, that's good. How about $10? Okay, good. So I took the jump, and oh my God, I was in heaven. The blood was running through my veins. I felt so alive. My instructor, who'd done millions of jumps, every day he did 5 jumps. He said, as we're falling, and I'm talking a mile a minute, he's like, oh my God, you're the best person to jump out of an airplane with. And the video's on, and that's in the video. And you can see my craziness. And I had a mask, an eye thing, so you couldn't see the eyes because my eyes were always so intense when I was in mania. I didn't know I was in mania. And after that, I said, we landed, let's do it again. Come on, let's go back out. And my husband's like, that's $500 every time you do that. I think once is enough. And he was scared shitless after that jump. He wanted nothing to do with that. So after that, we decided, okay, we're going to do this crazy other thing. And my story really isn't about what I'm going to say next, because, okay, some people will be shocked, some won't. Some people have already done this. It's their private life. Nobody needs to know. The only reason I'm bringing this up is to show you another dimension of bipolar, because with bipolar also comes a very sexual behavior that can be risky. People in our society don't want to talk about sex with bipolar because it's this taboo. Yet we're so intrigued to read about it and hear about it. But if it's us, we don't want to speak out. Believe me, sex is a wonderful, beautiful thing. But when you're in a manic moment, it can be very destructive and dangerous. And it's very much an outlet with somebody in mania. It feels good. It's risky. Just like alcohol and drugs. It's a way to numb the pain of the depression. And for me, this sexual exploration that we took next in Vegas was the start of something that would change me. I found something that would bring on my mania. My husband and I decided, let's have a threesome in Vegas. That was the moment that things changed for me. Because of that behavior, and maybe because of the taboo that was associated with it, I felt alive. And for me, there was a new journey. It took about a whole year of a freedom, of a sexual exploration. And that's where you need to read in the book all the details with my husband and how this all happened. It's just too much to go into at this point. And so after this sexual exploration, I became a full-fledged escort in Las Vegas. I was the proper, perfect little girl. I did no wrong as a child. I grew up in a religious family. I was the one that was always talked about and praised. I was the one that made my family so happy. I brought my parents so much joy. Looking back, that was too much pressure. I was the source of happiness. And a part of me realizes this whole Vegas exploration, again, it wasn't about the sex. It was a little bit. It was about the taboo. It was about not being the perfect girl anymore. It was a rebellious thing. I'm 42 years old, and this is happening to me. I'm 50 now. It was 8 years ago. But I was like a child rebelling, and it felt incredible. I remember even looking back thinking, if my family, if they even knew what I was doing, I am not as good as they think I am. I'm not the golden child, and I don't want to be held at that standard. So there definitely was this rebellion in me. But that life could only live so long. I was living a double life. I was holding this secret. And I had a client who decided, he found out I wasn't just the escort, I was this Olympic runner. And he thought, I'm going to call a tabloid. I'm going to be the one to ruin her life because she's ruining my life. Because I had not been able to see him on one occasion. He thought I was rejecting him. I later find out through therapy that this person, because he was not, in my opinion, he's not worth even talking about. He was a sociopath. He had no feelings of remorse or feelings that he would hurt me or possibly take my life. So he called The Smoking Gun. It's a tabloid for athletes where they report on athletes and try to ruin their life. And so the tabloid actually found me and approached me and told me, basically, your life is over. Give us a statement and it can be better. We can write this in a better way. I said, absolutely not. There's no way. You can't prove this. They had the proof. And I was outed. I had 2 weeks to tell my family. Hardest thing in the world to do is call your parents. Say, I was an escort in Las Vegas, and the world is going to know. Again, the golden child who brought them so much happiness. What's really difficult is my mother did not want to be alive when she heard this news. She was so devastated. I had shamed them so much. They took this as me hurting them. This had absolutely nothing to really hurt them, a little bit as being rebellious, but not once was I truly thinking, I'm doing this to hurt you. I did this because this is what made me alive. Of course I did think I'm not the perfect child. Absolutely. But this was me doing what I wanted to do. I knew what I was doing. That was the hardest part, was knowing that it became about them versus it became about me. And with people that have been what they believe embarrassed by somebody in their family, you have to think, it's not about you. You shouldn't be the one embarrassed. Focus on the one who needs the help instead of focusing on yourself and how that makes you feel. But our society and people around us tend to shame. The community where my parents lived, the community was shaming them, so they took that in. Instead of saying, they could have said, you know what, our daughter is a wonderful person, and we're not ashamed of her. There's a reason why this all happened. But I realized, because I was so angry at the time at my parents, why can't they understand this? Why can't they try to understand this? And I realized again through therapy that they weren't capable. They had never learned that in their childhood. Their parents never taught them. And when I found that out from my psychologist at the time, that they weren't capable, it just took this whole weight off my shoulder. How can I expect them to understand this and get me? How can I pound this hammer over their head and tell them, why don't you get it? Why don't you go to therapy? I couldn't do that. They refused therapy with me. And when the doctor said they're not capable, I let it all go. I'm like, wow, you're right. And it's okay. They can have their own thoughts, but I don't have to carry those with me. And that was incredibly freeing, incredibly. So after all this, years pass, I start to write a book, and now I really have to deal with what happened in Las Vegas. My daughter was 7 at the time in Las Vegas, and I'm writing the book, going through all these things, thinking, wow, I'm going to have to really disclose my life and every behavior, because unfortunately sex sells a book, and I had to describe some of the behaviors in there. In hindsight, I wish I could go back and take some of that out, but at the same point, it helps people to understand how risky and how crazy the things that you can do when you're in a manic mode. So I want people to see that and understand, don't shame somebody for these crazy behaviors. It's so important to show love and support and realize that there's an underlying problem. The behaviors really mean nothing. I talk a lot. I do a lot of sex-positive talking, and I talk to women a lot. Maybe a woman who has gone through her husband having an affair, and she decided to run out the door. Her husband had the affair. She's gone. Same thing could have happened with me and my escorting in Vegas. My husband could have run out the door. But what my husband did is he didn't look at the sex. Just like somebody who has had an affair, they focus on the sex versus focusing on what the problem was. Both sides, there's an issue going on, but we tend to want to blame the one who had an affair. Really, don't focus on the sex. Focus on what the problem was to get that person to go that way. So my husband did that for me. He said, you know what? I'm not going to focus on the sex. I'm going to focus on your behavior. I was diagnosed with bipolar about 2 weeks after I was outed. And when he found out my diagnosis, he then immediately focused on my illness completely. He said the behaviors mean absolutely nothing because your wellness comes first. And so he dove into therapy with me. We discovered why all this had happened. And you know what? This whole experience that took me to hell and back, to the deepest, darkest parts of my life, I hit rock bottom, have made me who I am today, have given me this incredible strength to tell my story. But I couldn't have done it without my husband and my daughter. My husband, he completely helped me to explain it to my daughter. We sat down together. She was maybe around 9 years old, that we were able to kind of tell her the story in a way through a psychologist. We told her, you know what, your mom has had a lot of boyfriends. That was how we described it. And so my daughter's reaction was, that was the first step. Because you have to, with a child, this is a very delicate issue, very, very, very delicate. And my husband by my side, we were showing love. The love was there, and we wanted her to see that. And her reaction was, well, what were their names? So I gave her the minion names. I gave Bob, whatever the minions were. And then she said, okay, well, can we have a play date? Do you think you could call Kaya's mom and I could have a play date? Sure. So it became a very slow process where she could process these things in her head. And now it's actually become a topic. She's 13. I brought it up the other day. We were talking about the guy who outed me. And she had just been studying something about sociopaths. And I said, the guy who outed me, he was a sociopath. And she's like, oh my God, Mom, he totally was. He's the one who told on you because you were having sex with all those guys. And I'm like, yeah, it's become just a normal conversation. Kids can handle this. And if anything, my daughter and her journey with sex will be completely open with us parents, completely. And in many ways, it tends that children who understand this aren't going to be the ones who secretly hide it and maybe go out and get STDs, or people were already saying the opposite to me after my story came out. Your daughter is doomed. She is psychologically going to be ruined because her mother was having sex and an escort in Vegas. It's actually the opposite, as long as a parent handles it the right way. We have conversations about sex all the time. Everything is open. It's an incredible gift that I was given, because as a child, we never talked about sex. We never talked about periods. I didn't know how to use a tampon. I mean, it was not even discussed. And the fact that I can have this open dialogue with my daughter, it's just a beautiful, beautiful gift that I am so grateful for. I'm not grateful for the people that I hurt in my life. That's the most difficult part. But I know that my journey was for this reason to become to who I am. And I also want to say my recovery, yoga, huge in my recovery, support, love, the right doctors, the right care, knowing that I'm flawed. And I only really, truly hang out with people that are flawed. Even though you all are, I like the ones that admit it and just come out there. I have a friend, I was addicted to heroin, but I got off. I've been free of heroin for 10 years. I want to hear real stories. Nobody needs to carry those layers in them. So I like you if you're real and you're honest and you share your story. I'll still like you if you want to keep it inside, because I understand that. And when the time's right, let me know, and then we can be friends. So thank you so much. Thank you for listening to my story. And please share your story with somebody. It may hurt, it may be painful, but I say go through the door that's burning rather than the ones of flowers and beauty, because the one that's burning is going to take that flame away. We have to step in it. And if you have the courage, or if you need help, that's why we have beautiful people here to help, and seek that help, because the strong people reach out for help. Okay? Thank you. God bless. Thank you so much.